And with that, the Secretary of Defense was fired. Well, I'm joined tonight by Bradley Bowman. He's the Senior Director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He has been a National Security Advisor in the U.S. Senate. He served in the U.S. Army. Brad, it's good to have you back here on the day. What does firing Mark Esper immediately after an election and in the middle of a disputed election outcome, what does that mean for U.S. security and the morale of U.S. servicemen and women?
No, thanks for the opportunity to join you again. It's a pleasure and an honor. I think the morale of our servicemen and women will be okay. I think our allies and adversaries need to know that the U.S. maintains a preeminent military capability, and we have the means to defend our interests and those of our allies. But I must say that this firing of Mark Esper is unfortunate, both in terms of the manner of how it was done and also its timing.
Esper was expected to be fired. Earlier this year, he did not support Trump's notion of deploying the military, the U.S. military, to quell protests and riots within the U.S. I mean, Esper's stance, it is the stance that is taken by, I would say, all leaders at the Pentagon. Can we say that the Pentagon and the president right now are about as estranged as they have been?
I wouldn't. I would say there are real issues there, and you've highlighted one of them. I wouldn't say the Pentagon, right, because that's kind of amorphous, and most of the people serving in the Pentagon are either service members or Department of Defense civilians, and all of them have sworn an oath not to a president but to the Constitution. But there's no doubt there were real issues between Mark Esper, whom I know and respect, and the president. And the irony here is one of my colleagues at my think tank has said is that, the President Trump, kind of mocked Mark Esper, calling him Yesper, implying he's a yes man. But the reality is it looks like he was fired because he was anything but a yes man. And there were real area differences. There's questions about the naming of U.S. bases after Confederate generals, where Mark Esper appeared to be taking action inconsistent with the president's view. And then these subsequent statements by Secretary Esper after the unfortunate incident in Lafayette Park behind the White House.
What does all of this mean for those who are just under the Secretary of Defense? They are the ones who would have to carry out an order from the president in a military conflict, for example. They would be held responsible. Can you imagine them carrying out an order from President Trump if that order were to be illegal or unconstitutional or maybe violate a treaty?
Well, it's a great question. One of the reasons why I said a moment ago I felt like the timing was unfortunate was because, we're in a period of transition here, to say the least, in the United States, and we really do need leadership in the Pentagon right now, in my view, that is willing to, as appropriate, push back on bad ideas that may emanate from the White House. From my view, we've had one or two of those in the last 3.5, 4 years. And it's not a good time to have an acting secretary leading the Department of Defense. So that is concerning. I would also note James Anderson, the acting undersecretary of Defense for Policy, also resigned today. Mm-hmm. So you really see just dramatic changes at the top of the Pentagon. So I am concerned, but I do take some comfort in the following. When I was serving in the Army myself, I was an assistant professor at West Point. I taught a class in American politics. In the first class, I would always remind the cadets, future Army officers, that their oath was to the Constitution and not to any individual, not to any president. And I think our service members will remember that, as they always have done, and they'll be faithful to that Constitution. Our country's going to be okay, but it's going to be a rough couple months, unfortunately, I think, but we'll get through it.
You speak to the servicemen, the people who make up the military. The defense community in Washington. I mean, the president firing his Secretary of Defense with a tweet, or even in that tweet, Trump succeeded in belittling Mr. Esper just by the way he wrote it. I mean, is this a commander-in-chief that people in the military, can they respect Donald Trump?
Well, it's a good question. I wouldn't want to pretend to speak, and you're not asking me to do that, to speak for all of them. But, there were reports by The Atlantic and others about what the president reportedly said. Obviously, that doesn't sit well with a lot of people. You want your commander-in-chief to have the best interests at heart of service members and their families. I like I said, I know Mark Esper from before he served in the Pentagon. Let's remember, he served 20 years in the U.S. Army. Yeah. He served impressively, in my view, as Secretary of the Army. And he's also served honorably as Secretary of Defense. We can debate, this policy is good, that policy is bad. No man or woman is perfect. But, this is not how any human being should be treated, particularly someone who served our country so honorably. It's unfortunate that we've arrived at this place in American domestic politics where we treat political adversaries or people we disagree with as enemies. We have too many real enemies in the world to be treating our fellow citizens that way. I think it's unfortunate and potentially dangerous.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people on both sides of the Atlantic who would agree with you 100% on that. Brad Bowman, Senior Director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington. Brad, as always, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and we appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.